First of all, special thanks for having us here today, and you guys are looking really sharp in the suit. It's been some time since I've put on a suit, but thanks to Zhao and the team, I think it's a really good thing for us to get dressed up for these type of events now. So before we start, I guess we just want to do some quick introductions. So I'm Darren, Baringa Partners. We're energy consultants. We support data center operators. But I'd like to maybe just have the team here just do a quick introduction, who you are, a bit about your company, and then we can crack on with the session. So, Jeffrey.
Sure, Darren, thank you. I'm Jeffrey Tay. I'm the Chief Development and Marketing Officer for Galaxy Data Center. Galaxy Data Center is headquarters in Singapore. We are a brand new, I would say, international green energy and data center developer in Asia. Currently, we are still funded by our head office in China. The bigger group is called Hoyin Technologies. All right, so we have 5.5 gigawatts of green energy in China, in a province called Huailai, 1.5 hours drive away from Beijing. This power is generated by ourselves, and we manage the grid, and we provide the power to an 800 megawatt data center park of 27 buildings right now, of which AI DC occupies 70% of the consumption. And this is who we are right now. And leveraging this experience that we have, our first project in Asia is in Thailand. All right. If some of you go on LinkedIn and some of the news, you will see that we are investing 2 billion over the next 3 to 4 years in Thailand for a 300 megawatt data center.
Wai Mun?
Hello everyone, my name is Wai Mun. So I've been in the data center industry for quite a while. So I know Jeffrey from previous life as well. So glad to meet all you guys. My background, as I mentioned, so now I'm with YTL Data Centers for the past maybe about 3 years. For YTL DC, we are also relatively new to the scene, having started in about 2021. So right now we have data centers in Singapore, which is a relatively small site, and a large campus in Johor for 600 megawatts. So right now we are already completed the 4th DC on the campus, and we continue to build and deliver as we speak. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it later, but right now it's really in Johor, it's really you kind of it's as fast as you can build because the demand is pretty strong. So that's what's happening. Pass it on.
Thank you. Hi, afternoon. Thank you, Wai Mun. Good to see all of you. Boon Chye from BBP. We essentially provide energy savings as a service to asset owners that has large demand for cooling services. So for example, in data center, 33 to 50% of data centers' energy usage is related to cooling. Our technology is also deployed in industrial buildings, hospitals, large commercial buildings. So essentially, we either apply a software or we can even upgrade the HVAC cooling system equipment on our balance sheet, and asset owners continue to run the cooling system the way they want it. So it's a partnership between us and asset owners to upgrade their brownfield data centers cooling assets. So, the CAPEX is funded by us, and, we get payback through, let's say, a contract period. We are funded by Actis, a global platform that invests in sustainability infrastructure.
Thanks so much, Boon Chye. So maybe I just want to set the scene. We heard earlier from the prior panel around the uptake of AI. And I think as financiers looking to invest their dollars in infrastructure, there is an interesting trend here where we have huge compute, data that's going to be stored, energy that's going to be consumed, and that's just going to continue to grow. Now, linked to that is the sustainability element. So there's pressures around how do I be more green in that environment? And the trilemma is that ultimately clients don't want to pay more for that infrastructure. And so in that world, there is a massive challenge around long-term assets. How do we finance that? How do we transition that? And how do we take either current data centers to be green, or how do we create data centers that are green, and perhaps even to the Neocloud model where you're moving from a data center organization to an energy producer and putting power into the grid. So these are kind of the long-term journeys that we're seeing. And obviously we've got people that have, Jeffrey's worked across China, we've got Boon Chye and the team here looking at other things, Wai Mun in Southeast Asia. But perhaps I'll start first around the content around ESG. So Boon Chye, I'd like to ask you a bit about your view. What are you seeing now in terms of ESG metrics being asked from you for data centers across the region and around the world?
I think one of the metrics that's consistently coming up over the years is PUE. Yeah, so essentially your total power usage over the power usage of your IT load. Yeah, so the holy grail is really one, right? I mean, I think Wai Mun and Jeffrey can sort of allude to that. Yeah, so that's consistently one of the key metrics that we get asked about. How can we reduce the PUE? The second one, maybe in more recent times, is carbon intensity, and that relates to where you get energy from. Is it green? Yeah.
So how are you seeing data center companies transform their infrastructure? And I'll go on to the developer side in terms of what you're seeing from your side, but how are you helping companies reduce PUE, become more carbon efficient?
Yep. So we focus on the energy savings efficiency side, which reduces the total power. And if you look at total power usage of data centers in general, right, close to 50% is coming from the cooling side of things. Yeah, and if you dive deeper on the cooling side, there's different pillars that you can work on. There's a space cooling element, which are the chiller plants and whatnot. And then when you go into the server room, you talk about racks. And then when you go down to the motherboard or the chip level, people are now talking about liquid cooling. Yeah, so there are different aspects, different technology, and different service provider that's serving all these different spaces. Yeah. Okay.
Wai Mun, I'd like to ask you about your experience. I mean, you mentioned liquid cooling. We've heard a lot about that. General cooling. Like, what's real? What are data centers really doing now from your perspective?
So I guess just to add, maybe besides the PUE index, right? I guess the other key element that data centers are focusing on right now is like water. I think that's another element, right? You call it WE or whatever, but I think that those are the key ingredients that goes into what makes the DC green, right? And part of that is because of this transition into liquid cooling, if you will. And part of that is because of the whole AI wave, right? Essentially, our racks are getting hotter and hotter. So the cooling technologies have moved from essentially air-cooled to liquid-cooled, right? And what is the most common type of liquid cooling right now is kind of direct-to-chip. And with that also means that you not only look at your power efficiency, but how much water you're also using, right? And that is creating a sort of, I wouldn't say a strain, but it's concern among most of the cities or countries that's hosting the AIDCs to make sure there's enough, sort of the raw materials, right? Because obviously power and water and land is actually something that's not only meant for AI, right? It's also meant for the people as well. So you have all these kind of things that's feeding into the whole equation. And I think in different cities and countries, definitely in Singapore, that's why we had a moratorium here, right? But also around the rest of the countries, there's increasing emphasis on what is sustainable, what can you do, and what does it make sense for your people versus your machines, right, essentially.
And are you seeing different sort of perspectives depending on the countries? Like, for example, you mentioned Singapore, and I think Singapore is trying to lead the way in terms of green data centers, but I'd assume also in other parts, and Jeffrey, you can comment in a second, Thailand, but from your experience, Wai Mun, it's not the same by market, is it? And what's your experience on that infrastructure and the cooling and the power side of things on ESG?
I think it's definitely different per country. And I think that on one extreme is definitely where we are today, right? essentially island, no water resources, no real power resources. Everything has to be imported, and even the land is very expensive. And if you talk about building I think just now the previous panel was talking about building AIDCs in Singapore, right? What makes sense, right? I mean, do you really want a huge training facility here? I mean, I think that's the question that the lawmakers have been debating, right? I think the answer is probably no, just because you don't have the resources and availability here, right? So then, which part of the AI ecosystem do you want locally, right? Which is things like more things that have to be closer to the source, right? So stuff like that. And I think that's why we had the concept of Sijori, right? Pushing out to the edge where Johor and Batam kicks in, right? But then you're seeing that sort of being a little bit more constrained recently, and then the push out continues, right? Yeah. I mean, Jeffrey can talk about Thailand and whatever dynamics is happening there. But essentially, I think every country will have to figure out where they are on the scale and what makes sense for your people versus what makes sense for industry, essentially the AI industry. Yeah.
But it's super interesting because obviously with data sovereignty, then it links to actually energy sovereignty, because then you're starting to become a producer of energy, the amount of energy it consumes, and it starts to link to so many different things, water security, all those other elements. Really interesting feedback around what you're seeing around Southeast Asia. Jeffrey, being a bit cheeky, I'm actually really keen to hear actually what's happening in China, because I would say that as one of probably the most advanced countries and being able to execute at scale, any insight you can give to us about how you're seeing that with YTL translate into markets that you're seeing in Asia, or what you can share in this room, what's happening in China?
Sure. I think there will be three aspects that will come through. First is the country level, and then I go down to the industry level, and then specifically around AIDC. So from a country perspective, you're right. And just Mr. Archer, who has shared earlier about China, US policy. So China embarked on the strategy to go net zero by 2030. So the government has full force in terms of policy for all manufacturing, digital infra, to have processes in place, to have control mechanism in place to be net zero. And they are being tracked and monitored. All right. And given that, and Mr. Archer brought out a very good point, is about this gray line between, do you want a free world or do you want to be a regulated world? So China has adopted, in the last early 6 years, an unregulated way as well, because there's many provinces, like Inner Mongolia, I think you'll hear a lot, they can have their own grid, they can do their own power and things like that, and then other cities as well. As long as your government, all right, is embarking on green digital infra, you get money from the government, you can do so. All right, but the last 6 months, they are beginning to implement policy. They're going to regulate this. All right, so things like so-called you have a direct grid, you're working off the grid, you need to be registered as a microgrid. All right, there are policies coming in place, and also policies coming in to say, how do you have your talent, and what are the safety measures you have to manage that. So the last 6 months, the China green market is going through a revamp again. All right, but that said, how my group has done is that we do the source, grid, load, and storage. We spent 4 years building that whole solution. As I mentioned, we built 4 gigawatts of wind power, 1.53 gigawatts of solar power. We manage it on the grid in that province that we manage. All right, and then we supply that power to our own data center. And likewise, there's 2 nearby data center of equivalent size. We have the government agreeing that we will provide that grid to those parts as well. All right, but as market developer, I said over the last 6 months, new policies are in place. All right, but the whole idea is, how do you regulate and how do you measure towards that? And as a provider, when we are in China, all right, we are measured every half yearly. How are we achieving our goal against the net zero? They come and monitor us and track us. And because of this demand, all right, my group has developed an energy as a service software platform. Is empowered by Envision actually. They provided us the platform and the money. All right, we built this platform whereby we have a live system tracking the CUE, WUE, PUE, And also, how does that translate into number of trees we are reducing to cut? How does that translate into the ESG report? And there's an AI tool built in there to collect data from relevant authorities and things like that to do the benchmarking. And more importantly, this software tool, what it does is that it measures against the green power that's used on AI computing. So as you know, there's two segments of computing. So specifically, it's tracking the AI computing because of the high density load that's needed. So how much of the, let's say, the green power of us is actually utilized by the AI computing. So that tool helps us to track that. And embarking on that, as now I will share on a country level, we know Johor, I think our Wai Mun will know more. YTL does a lot. They have their own green energy, they have their own water resource. So all that will become a trend, I think, in the market that DC provider or developer, you cannot look at, you are just developing DC. You need to look at how you're developing your ESG resources. I think we hear a lot about day one, doing the water treatment and things like that. So that will become a key component. So if you look at where the Chinese players are doing, they are already doing that. So they do it as an integrated platform. All right, and we are hoping to bring this into Thailand. We are in discussion with ERC, Apple, EGAT. All right, so we are in terms of engaging them on policy making. Because there's a lot of gray line between how I use green power against black power. What are the policy need to be in place? How do I offset other than REC? All right, so there's many policies. So we come in that light to share. All right, so from a country level, there's different policy. From industry, we see the trend H100 compared to GB200, totally different application. And now we're talking about our dear GB300. Again, it's a transition. Yeah. So with that, I think the whole technology, the whole water utilization will become a very key challenge and real problem to face in this part of the world, especially Southeast Asia.
And thanks for sharing that. That's fascinating, Jeffrey. And in the case of Thailand, is when you talked about regulation and policy in Thailand and some of the brands that you mentioned as maybe off-takers or supporters, do you see a world where you're actually giving back into the grid, like in China? That's something that you're thinking of? Because, yeah, could you share a little bit about that? Because that's really interesting, because the moment you start to increase the demand of, I'm just not supporting my customers, but I'm supporting a grid, your demand curve of power almost can go through astronomically in volume by scale, and you're an energy producer, not just a data center company now. Can you share a little bit about how that journey has gone? Because I could imagine it not being so smooth.
Yeah, okay. But for our China case, is when the provincial authority allow us to manage the grid, part of the regulation that we have is whatever surplus or savings we have to pass it back to the household.
Right.
So that's one of the guidelines.
Wow.
All right. So we have to prove. That's why I say we have this measuring tool first, how much we are using actually for the AI and how much of it and how much of the savings we are doing. And then we have to pass back to the households.
So real-time data, savings pass through.
Correct.
There's a net impact for the communities.
That's right. And this is what we are coming to this part of the world and why we are sharing with the Thai government. We are engaging the Thai government a lot, and they are coming to see us every month. Different power company, just to understand how we are doing it. Because they want to understand the possible policies around that. And we will open up the channel for them to interact with the provincial government people in China so that they can exchange. You know, what works for China may not work for Thailand, but what are the maybe similarities that they can leverage on.
That's a super interesting use case for real-time data for data centers, because so when we were consulting data center companies back before the moratorium as well, you know, people were saying, complaining, were saying, well, you measure your data center at this point in time, your PUE looks great. And we started talking about, well, how do you make that more real time? So that's the case, which is not government, but it's more for the community. I'd like to maybe, you know, ask you, Boon Chye and Wai Mun, around your views around real-time data. I mean, are you seeing, I feel like it's not as real-time, it's very point in time, but how do you see that evolution? We've seen that on one end, but what are you seeing on your side of the equation? Are you seeing push for more real-time? Who's asking for the data for ESG metrics? Any insights from you, Boon Chye?
In most of the data centers and industrial facilities that we are optimizing, the data is provided to the customers real time or to the asset owners real time. For example, if we now talk about cooling system, right? I mean, space cooling, the air conditioning come from chillers, pumps, and cooling tower. So we've got sensors in the plant room that measures flow rate, pressure, and it goes down to energy efficiency level of each mechanical parts. And all this gets feed to the client's dashboard, real time, live. So at any point in time, right? I mean, if a regulator or a client, right, Microsoft comes in and they say, look, I want to know how your data center has been performing the last 6 months. I mean, you can do it live, pull out the data. You can make any graphs in any shapes and fashion. It's all automated today. So, but it's powerful because this is what customers are looking for. This is what the blue chips, clients are looking for.
It's being demanded now. And Wai Mun's similar or different perspectives from your end?
So if you enter our ops center, I mean, most of the parameters are there. I mean, you can see the actual PUE actually right live. So when we do our tours, that's one of our stations. And usually people will ask questions, right? Why is it like 1 point whatever? And I think that's when you kind of, to your question, right? So, I mean, there's PUE when it is just powered up, and there's PUE at full load. So that's usually how we explain it, lah. So when you see like 1.5 or whatever, it's usually when it's not fully loaded up yet, right? So that's that's because of all the BMS and everything and all the sensors and everything, you are able to really see most of the data actually real time. So similar to what Boon Chye is saying. So there's no, you essentially you see it as it happens.
I'd like to pivot the conversation now a little bit to innovation. We kind of touched on this, but now innovation financing. So my general observation has been financing, they want bankable projects and they want things that are committed long-term agreements. But the infrastructure is expensive. Let's call it cooling. There's a transition window. All these things come into play. And so, do we invest for the today or the foreseeable future or the long-term future? I mean, these are the problem statements we're seeing. Now, in the context of innovation and technology, we're hearing different models come up. That opens up doors for creative financing and opportunities. Question, maybe I'll start with you, Jeffrey, in terms of innovation. Like, how are you seeing innovation in the way your data centers are, and also perhaps financing mechanics that have come through that? So I don't want to put words in the mouth, but when you mentioned the consumer benefiting, like I can start to see actually different ways of measuring that benefit. Like, are you able to share a bit about that?
I think if I were to quickly summarize the potential investment around sustainability, there's two types, right? One, they call it the green bonds. The other is sustainability-linked bonds, all right, or financing. So in China, we have major banks bringing it, just like in this part of the world. All right, for example, for our project, we have Shanghai Pudong Bank financing us big time. All right, and we have Ping An financing us big time because of this platform that I mentioned just now. Because on top of this is the biggest challenge around all the sustainability, I think everybody already know, is heavy investment due to the Neocloud. All right, but I think one big element that's still missing is the storage. And at this point of time, the storage seems expensive because you do not know how much amount to store and how much will be utilized. All right, and this is where our group collecting 4 years of data, and because we are doing the source, grid, load, and storage, we will have a very robust data to prove that why this logic is there. We just published our ESG report in China. All right, we're going to share that. It's 178 pages. All right, but in there, the algorithm is verified. Of how we're doing this report is verified by independent asset management to look at how we created our algorithm to so-called come to this conclusion. Why are we saying this? All right, but of course, we are trying to go international with this report, but we know that we need data, and that's why we embark on Thailand. We need to have that data from the Thailand market in order to prove that this algorithm and this theory works for international market and not just China. So that's the journey that we are embarking.
That's really interesting. So by securing more information, real life, you're able to scale that and produce information for insurers who would back you and therefore get funding. So I've been working on similar projects across China to Asia where they want models built with real data, and then the insurers will back, and then they can issue bonds and banks will bank those, and trying to close that loop between an asset that is long-term and growing and the data that you're seeing. That's really fascinating stuff. And I would even go as far as saying on top of that information that you see, you could create so many different innovative, like adjacent business models. So we talked about your data center being storing of data. Now we're talking about an energy company, and now you're talking about a data company for maybe insurance companies or households or things like that.
Part of the requirement as a marketing officer, I push to my product team is I need this product to relate to dollar value. So by saving the PU, EWU, and CU, how much is that translating to dollar saving?
Yeah.
I think that would be the key interest for the investors to look at truly. And if there's not true saving, then where is the money going? So that's part of the algorithm that the team is working on right now.
Wai Mun, how are you seeing it in, say, Johor or other parts in the area? I mean, everyone's racing into Johor, and I'm sure there's got to be some ways of finding some funding and innovation through that journey. I mean, or is it really more simple than that? Like, what's your experience around innovation of financing or innovation of what's happening in Johor?
I think I'm quite lucky, right? I'm one of the CEOs of data center platforms that don't have to worry about financing.
Maybe you can lend some out to us.
So I guess that's quite lucky because we are backed by one of the largest conglomerates. So essentially, I'm funded by my shareholders, right? So I'm quite lucky. But having said that, I do talk to a lot of different my counterparts and understand, let's say, equivalent of myself in a PE-funded environment in Johor, right? I know what they go through. So a lot of what they focus on. Let's say if you have a new platform, like a PE-funded platform, and then you start out in Johor, right? The first thing that you do, you have to juggle two things, right? You juggle your off-takers with your financing. So it's actually quite an interesting life for those guys because everything is tied together. So as you close your deals and you call your customers and whatnot, right, you have to worry about whether that deal is financeable. And you're constantly on calls with your banks and your customers at the same time. So, I've been with those guys before, right? So I sort of understood how it works. And the only thing I would say is that I'm glad I don't have that dilemma. So usually I close a deal and then, the HQ does the financing for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine right now the race to lock in anchor tenants or anchor clients or long-term agreements to basically help fund what is an infrastructure project that is now mixed with energy and all these ESG commitments. Boon Chye, you shared with me in our lead-up that your company looks at supporting financing models to help roll out your solutions to help companies go green or save money quickly. Can you share a bit more about sort of innovation around how you're looking at that from your organization's point of view?
Yeah, so maybe a couple of things. So if it's a brownfield data center and let's say the owners anticipate that it's going to run for another maybe 5 to 10 years, right? So one way that can be easily solved is we can just use our software platform to optimize the existing cooling system. So none of the HVAC equipment needs to be changed out. So just plugging in the software, we can create a 10-15% savings within 3 to 6 months. So that's a very easy one to solve. And our fees are 100% performance-based. That means asset owner only pay us based on what we save for them. Yeah, and the saving is third-party verified. We are working with a very large institution, TUV, to certify the savings on an annual basis. So that's very transparent. So that's one angle. And if it's a brownfield data center that is showing not so good efficiency because of equipment aging and things like that, we could come in and refresh or upgrade some of the HVAC equipments like chillers, pumps, or even cooling tower on our balance sheet. So data center don't have to come out with any single cent, and they pay us back through an OPEX over a contract period. Yeah, so that solved the upfront CAPEX. Yeah. So, and if it's a greenfield, then we could actually co-invest together, or we could even take it on our balance sheet as well and do the same OPEX model. But if you look at these three different options, right, there's one very critical ingredient that's in place. We give asset owners and operator full flexibility to still run the cooling system. Yeah, so they're not totally outsourcing everything to us. We're just here to support more on the financing side, on the tech side, on the energy efficiency side. The asset, by and large, still owned by the owners, and they have full freedom to run it. Because what we learned from data center is the SLA with the end customer is very stringent, and many of them are not comfortable to cede control of a critical infrastructure like cooling to a third party, and we get it. Yeah, so we have a lot of flexibility to work around those challenges that asset operators face. Yeah.
Thanks for that. So, I mean, if I try to reflect, maybe some of the audience here, I mean, we're financing transition for data centers. There are brownfield solutions to help you go green and save money straight away. There are sort of long-term kind of business models here, which I'm now hearing, which are perhaps more bankable and interesting, actually. And then there's everything in between in Asia. I have a sort of a broad question to you. We've heard a lot around in the past around what obviously the hyperscalers are doing in the US with SMR, so nuclear reactors on site to generate their own energy. We in Singapore with the DCCFA launching at the end of this month, they're being asked to source green energy, like imports from all around the world, to bring in physical 50% of the energy to be green, to help justify why they should have a presence in Singapore. And then we talked about this neocloud concept, which I feel feels very long-term in a way, but I wouldn't, and I guess my question to the team here would be do you see that happening in Asia? Where do you see it happening first? Like, what's the form and factor of a neocloud going to look like, perhaps? Maybe, Jeffrey, you're quite close to that story, but I'd be curious just to hear your perspectives on that.
Again, there's two segments, the Western and the Eastern. So the Western, we know CoreWeave is now pretty much transitioning from a crypto mining to the OpenAI, ChatGPT for Microsoft, and that's why they are deploying a lot. And in Korea, you see Neocloud, right? They are doing that a lot. And in this part of the world, I think y'all may have observed some Chinese guys like Freya Technologies, Mega Speed announcing in East Malaysia. There's another two more coming out. So there's this transition because they are owning the chip. So they say, how much is your bill? All right, and they get the backing Gorilla investor, 1.6 billion with Freya Technologies to deploy in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand as well. All right, so given that context, I think, yes, it's going to be a game changer. All right, because how close do they stick to where the fund is and where the technology is? All right, because all these are now evolving around NVIDIA. All right, and then there will be a trend that will come out when the Chinese GPU is coming up. I think it will be the game changer. And in China, liquid cool and things like that, there's many solutions. And coming to your small nuclear plant, I think there's other technologies that's being explored in China, and there's hydro.
Hydro?
All right, hydro reactor, all right, not nuclear reactor. Yeah. All right, so they are deployed in, right now, 2 cities, I think, near the sea, and they just pull in the seawater, recycle it, put into the reactor, and generate the power. All right, and of course these are very cost effective at this moment. All right, but the money that's going to be spent or the incremental is how to treat the seawater to make sure that it's suitable for cooling. All right, so that's another element of the equation there. So a lot of money will be in sustainability. I think there's a lot of solution. So and I think being in the industry right now, especially people like YTL and others, I think having that resource, controlling that resource, and able to build a one-stop solution from a source to the consumption of the power, I think will be the critical differentiating factor moving forward.
I mean, data centers now I'm hearing is like, we know it's critical infrastructure, but now it's actually more than just data, it's data energy. Wai Mun, like, what are you seeing? Do you see neoclouds in Southeast Asia anytime soon, or what's your general sense around that question there?
I think definitely so far, I think in the US, with what Jeffrey mentioned, right, the CoreWeaves of the world, and in Europe, I think there's one or two as well. In Asia, it tends to be as per most of Asia, right, is a very fragmented market, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So because Asia is a very large place, right, it's not as homogeneous as the West. So you do hear of like a couple of Japanese guys, but they are more focusing obviously on Japan market kind of thing, right? And I'm sure there's Australia somewhere doing it as well, and then all the names that you rattle on, right? So which is the Chinese. So to be specific, when you mentioned those names, it's the Chinese. So I think you have the Chinese, you have the Japanese, there's maybe one or two Korean guys that are trying to do the same in Asia. And then you have the rest, which is essentially like Southeast Asia and whatnot, right? And does Southeast Asia have the sort of scale to become a neocloud? Is it too fragmented to form a Southeast Asian neocloud? It's a bit difficult to see right now, right?
Yeah.
So when you mention Asia or APAC, is always a very complicated situation, right? Because there's no, it's not a homogeneous market. So if you want to say, you want to go to Jensen tomorrow and says that, hey, my business plan is to become the CoreWeave of Asia, right? What are you? Are you a fryer, or are you a Japanese player or whatnot? It's very difficult to say. Yeah.
It's fair point, I think, and I think the other narrative, as we are energy consultants, see that when you look at the sustainability, just put the data center side and just sourcing of green energy, if you look at Southeast Asia, it's also very different. I mean, Philippines, 20% of the population doesn't even have power to the home. I mean, why would you be talking about green energy when they can't afford just getting power out on coal plants, right? So when you look at the national agendas and you look at technologies like energy technologies and broader technologies, it is kind of different. We probably have a minute or two for a question or two, so if there are any, maybe we'll take any of those questions from the audience. But Boon Chye, on the same point, any comment around neoclouds? You may not be as close to it, but what's your reaction to what you've been hearing?
Yeah, I agree with Jeffrey and Wai Mun. I think at the highest level, it's likely going to be a straight-on competition between US and China. Yeah, and so that's going to probably take up 80% or of the global capacity. Yeah.
Great. If there's no questions, I would ask the panel here to maybe just leave one parting comment each around green gigabytes, and what would you like to share with the audience? Maybe we'll start with you, Jeffrey.
I think maybe the one sharing that I will really do is that I think, given the context of where Southeast Asia is developing, of course, Japan and Korea has always been a very mature market, but they have their own challenges. As we know, the power generation is always the key issue. Green power sources is an issue. But I think the context of how the whole ESG story and the investment market, I think we see a strong synergy, and I think the whole digital infra investment story will be taking a different look at how data centers, so it's no longer purely investing in a data center or just a DC developer, but I think the dynamics will be looking at the whole portfolio. All right, and this is where my group itself is betting on, whereby we are hoping to present a full solution, full suite of solutions. And given that, we like I say, we are new, we are learning as well in this part of the world. So YTL is a good example, I would say. But so we are hoping to create that unique value proposition. And I think the investment industry, the investment market, And just a little bit, the Singapore office, Galaxy Data Center, we're going to have a small office focused on facing the investors. In that office, we'll see about 7 investment managers that will deal with different aspects, and that's where the office sits right now. All right, and all our resources overseas will be then the deployment, construction, everything. Everybody else will be housed in that country.
Wow.
Yeah.
So full service, broader,
That's right.
and a whole,
That's right.
a much more comprehensive offering now.
Yeah. And maybe the last one is, given that Wai Mun is saying that money is not an issue, drinks on him.
Yeah, Wai Mun can invest. Sorry, quickly, Wai Mun, your last few words, and then I'll get Boon Chye to.
No, I think the interesting for me is maybe I think we spoke about a bit about CFA in Singapore. I think that's the kind of where things will move in the future. Maybe not in exactly how the CFA is being structured, but like how energy, green energy, and data centers are being looked at as one essential problem or essential problem statement, right? So I think that is going to be the beginning of how it looks like. I mean, to be honest, when they told us the CFA is going to look like that, most of us were like, what, seriously? You know, all the data center guys were looking at each other and it's like, we know PE,
We're not energy
WE,
companies.
we don't know biothermal, whatever, right?
Biomethane.
So, and over the last few months, I think all of us are being educated. We have no choice, right? And we kind of figure out where all this stuff is coming from. And just the fact that we are here on this panel, right, means something, right? I mean, a year or 2 years ago, I don't think we'll be invited on these kind of panels. We'll probably be on panels talking about like real data center stuff, right? So I think this is where the things will kind of evolve, and the two kind of industries will somewhat come together, right? Because even the guys, when I talked to the renewables guys, they said that data centers is going to be my largest off-takers. So essentially, the industries are going to be rather intertwined. So I think that will be very interesting for us moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. And Boon Chye.
Yeah, I think sustainability has come a long way, right? I mean, there's still room to grow, but there's a lot of solutions out there now that's commercially viable, that's proven, that operators and owners can tap on. And in terms of business model, there's also unique partnership now that you can think about. I mean, you don't have to do all the heavy lifting on your own from a CapEx perspective. So there are companies out there that's willing to partner or even take on some of your balance sheets and, you know, share the load. Yeah, so that's my past takeaway, partnership, yeah.
So with that, we'll wrap up. Huge thanks, Jeffrey, Wai Mun, Boon Chye. Round of applause.
Thank you so much for all the panelists and for Darren for leading the discussion.